Hey, it's Tuesday and I'm rocking. I can't believe this, man. It's actually kind of chilly out in Atlanta today. We had some storm roll through here and it knocked the temperature down quite a bit. And that allowed me to break out the new flannel. And check this out. It's Rams flannel. I got my Rams flannel on. We're
All
undefeated.
right.
We're 1-0. And I can still say that at least for another 5 days. So I'm going to continue to say that. But anyway, it is the what I like to call the BBC, not the British Broadcasting Channel. It is the Brent Broadcasting Channel. And with me today, I've been talking about let's see, voice first stuff and hoping to see more progress, and kind of disappointed that we haven't seen more progress from the industry, generally speaking, but not for the blame of this person that we're talking with today. Chuck, I don't even know if I want to try to pronounce your last name because I don't want to butcher it. So, how do you pronounce your last name, Chuck?
Ganapati.
See, I was thinking it was that, but with my luck, I probably would have just butchered it. So, I just want to make sure it was said properly. But Chuck is the founder of Tact.ai. He's a longtime CRM industry veteran. He's been all around. He knows where all the bodies are buried, and he's really one of the leading voices, if not the leading voices, when it comes to voice and conversational interfaces, when it comes to like CRM and particularly SFA. So, Chuck, it's always a pleasure to speak with you, and I've been really looking forward to this conversation today.
Same here, Brent. Great to see you as always.
Absolutely. And so, just for folks who don't know, or maybe for folks who don't know your background, why don't you give us a little bit of your personal background and then tell us a little bit about what you do at Tact?
Sure, happy to. I've been in the CRM industry, like you said, for many many years. In fact, very recently, I saw you on your other critically acclaimed public broadcasting show, the PBS,
What's the PBS?
the Paul and Brent Show. And well, I mean, you already run BBC and you co-run PBS.
Wow.
I mean, there isn't a bigger radio star than you, man. Um,
I appreciate that, but okay.
but
I'll
but
tell
I,
Paul
but that
about the PBS. That's a good
yeah,
one.
but that just reminded me your show with Paul and Bob Stutz a couple weeks ago. You remember that one? That was a lot of fun. And Paul, Bob and I go way back, um, and it sort of has sort of been the. I did not work for the CIA or Army intelligence like Bob did, but I did work at Siebel. All right.
That's
So we worked together at Siebel. Some of the things that he was talking about brought back a lot of memories for me from our days together. He ran engineering for customer order management and apps, and I was the product guy for order management. So we had some good times in those days. And then I went on to Salesforce.com. Spent about 5 years at Salesforce. At the end, towards the end of it, I was responsible for Sales Cloud, Chatter, and Salesforce Mobile. And then I started Tact a few years ago after I took a break after Salesforce and started Tact. And we're a startup that's focused on thinking about what is the next generation of CRM. How do we address some of the problems we've seen in CRM? Bob talked about some of that as well. And we're a company of over 100 people spread across different countries. We have our center in Silicon Valley, in Bangalore, and we have our customer success teams and sales teams spread out around the US and in Europe as well.
So one of the things that really caught my attention, early on with you guys was, yeah, your focus on how do you make like CRM in particular, I think from a sales person's perspective, more attractive to use. I mean, let's face it, CRM is still a four-letter word to a lot of people, particularly when it comes to the sales professionals who really do not want to spend their time inputting data or trying to update data or maintain data. And so you guys have been focused pretty heavily on that problem or that challenge, I'll say it like that. And one of the things that you really start looking at is how do we leverage some of the easier ways for people to get things done, and that's trying to use your voice or do some short kind of chat, some way to make it easier for people to finally use these applications. I mean, we're in 2020. You started years ago on this. Where are we with this?
I think voice is, I'm not going to lie, voice is hard, right? And we started on this journey, as you pointed out, with the premise that we want to make software that people love to use. And it's strange coming from someone like me, who's been in the CRM business and having been part of Siebel and Salesforce, and building products that, as you rightly pointed out, that end users, which is sellers, sales professionals, have never really thought of as their tool that's going to help them be successful. And as you can imagine, as a product person myself, that was always something that bothered me to no end, right? That the end users of the products I built did not ever want to use them. I'll be honest, I've never met a salesperson that's ever wanted to use my product, ever. Back
I
when I
mean,
was at
just wait a
Siebel
minute.
at
Just think about
Salesforce.
that challenge. I mean, you are. I mean, and these applications can do some really great things, really tremendous things. But even with that in mind, kind of knowing that a certain population of folks just don't want to use them, and it has nothing really to do with you, but it's just maybe the perception of, well, these systems really are not made for me. They're made for the managers, and the managers want to have certain information. It doesn't really, it's really not made for me. That's what the perception is. So
That's
how
right.
difficult is that? I mean, just to begin with, and then trying to kind of solve that challenge, even though that that thought is pretty persistent even today.
Yeah, it is. One of our large customers is Honeywell, and they use Tact extensively. And our sponsor at Honeywell is a gentleman by the name of Charles Forsgard. He's their VP of Global Sales for their SIoT business, which is sensing and IoT, right? So they sell all kinds of sensors to hospitals, to other organizations that where sensing is very important, like gas sensors and so on. And he's a veteran, so he recently, we interviewed him recently for a podcast that we did, and we do as well at Tact. And one of the things that, and he has a lot of great opinions on this matter, far more informed than mine, because he actually faces this problem every day. I only have to deal with it as a product person when I hear direct customer feedback. But he has thousands of salespeople that work in his organization globally that have this exact problem. And he said, if you think about CRM as a tool that helps the manager get a better understanding of what the reps are doing and what the state of the pipeline is, it's a noble goal, but it serves no purpose to the seller. And what he has done is that he has turned that around, and he started this journey when he was at GE, and he was a Tact customer back at GE. And when he came over to Honeywell, he called us and he said, "Hey, I'm now at Honeywell, and I need Tact in here ASAP." And if you ask him why, he'll say, his goal for CRM is to help the salesperson be a better version of themselves, right? A seller that's better prepared when they're interacting with a customer is going to be more successful. And a seller that follows up with the customer and does what they promised to the customer after a meeting is going to be more successful. Like there's just no argument around that. There's no need to debate that. The question is, how does one do that? You could say, as a salesperson, look, I've got everything in my head, right? Or I have it in my handy little notebook. And I know what I told my customer. I know when I need to follow up with my customer. And when I walk into a customer meeting, man, that's when I'm at my best. I'm fully prepared. I know how to talk to the customer. The reality is, as our roles are changing across the board, and sales is becoming more modern, and you have to scale yourself, and it's not possible to keep everything in your head. And he, in fact, Charles mentions that since COVID, one of the things that's happened, to his sales team, is that they're not having, a 45-minute, an hour-long meeting at the customer site like they used to. Talk about the weather, talk about sports, and then maybe spend 20 minutes talking about the project and spend another 30 on everything else. Those were the good times. That ain't happening anymore, right? So you've got shorter interactions. Some are on the phone, some are through Zoom or Teams, and but you have 10 minutes with the customer. You have 15 minutes with the customer. So what you're saying is, like, they're having they're having more meetings than before, but they're much shorter. They're compressed, and they're multitasking, right? From one customer conversation to the next. Add to that, you're at home and you've got kids. I've got 5 kids doing virtual, 4 kids, excuse me, not 5, 4 kids. Well, I'm the 5th one, but 4 children who are doing virtual school. If you're in sales, you've got that. You can't be traveling. You're at home and you're multitasking. So that ability to stay in the flow and keep doing what you need to do as a seller is important. And for that, you need CRM. If you think about it, if you reframe the problem, which is what Charles does, you need CRM to be able to function better and make more money. Right? At the end of the day, if you're in sales, you're in it to close more deals and make a higher commission. So I think that change of viewpoint of how do we turn this from a tool that is needed to manage your pipeline, keep a record of your customers, all great goals, and they're not mutually exclusive. You still need to do those things, but how do you then add this layer of making it useful to the seller is really critical. And that's the journey we've been on. And I think if you do that, it kind of goes to what our true DNA and our company motto is, which is to make CRM more human friendly. And I think it can be done.
It sounds so obvious, making it human friendly and making it easier to use. And hopefully that allows it to be seen as something that's a help as opposed to a hindrance to a certain extent. And with kind of the modern technology and the way that you're seeing this voice technology kind of take hold, at least in certain instances, I'm going to go back a couple of years. I was really thinking that, wow, it seems to be happening. It seems to be, catching on. It seems like, the voice technology and the use cases were starting to develop, at least from the consumer standpoint. But then you kind of fast forward a couple of years now, and it feels, at least this is to kind of my experience, at least what I think, it just feels like where chatbots have definitely taken place, and to be able to use the apps to be able to text and get things done and talk to an automated or artificial intelligent assistant who can decipher what you're saying or what you're texting, and then be able to provide some kind of a contextual response. You're seeing that, and you're seeing it a lot, and I think it's really hitting a mark. But the voice thing, it seems like that is stagnated. I don't know if it's taken a step back or it's just kind of not gotten as far along as I was expecting. And I've talked to a number of different kind of executives at vendors in the industry, and I've asked them, so what's going on? I mean, what do you think is, and I think you already hit the nail on the head when you said, voice is hard. Do you think the difficulty of leveraging voice was underrated, or do you think it was just something that for whatever reason maybe has not become the priority as some of the other technologies were taken off? Am I wrong? Am I maybe my expectations might have been out of whack? what do you say? Where are we? Where we thought we were with voice, and if not, why not?
I don't know. I mean, do you use Siri or Google Assistant at home?
I use Siri, but I don't want to say the A word right now because she's over there listening. If I say Alexa, it'll go off. So I do have a Google Assistant, and I think and I do use them. Mostly use the A word more than the Google Assistant, and more than
Mhm.
Siri. But I've noticed my own usage. It varies, and I use it for certain things, and I have grown what I've been using it for over time too. But I was really hoping that maybe as people got comfortable from a consumer experience using these things, that would transfer over at some point to into our enterprise applications, because I really think the employee experience is ripe for a good voice interface that makes it easier for us to use these enterprise applications.
I agree. I think you see that happening all over, right? You see our usage, even in COVID, post-COVID time, people are spending a lot more time. I'm, for example, spending a lot more time at home, working from home. And just this past weekend, I installed a smart lock. So now I can just use my Apple Watch and say, "Hey, Siri, unlock the front door," and does it for me, right? So as people are spending more time at home, they're getting used to home automation through assistants like Alexa, and Siri and Google Assistant, depending on whether you're an Apple fan or a Google fan, and what phones you use. Which brings me to my next point, which is I think voice and mobile go hand in hand, right? If you're an iPhone user, you most likely end up with Siri and Siri-based HomeKit products, right? My garage is HomeKit enabled, my front door is HomeKit enabled, and my TV operation is HomeKit enabled. Like I can turn off the TV and so on and so forth. And I'm sure in the coming months, I'll find another project to do next weekend. So I think the fact that mobile and voice go together tells you something, right? That the companies who are really good in mobile are the ones who are more successful in voice. And the counter is also true. I love Microsoft, especially the new Microsoft and what they've done. They've always struggled with mobile, as you know, and no surprise that they're also struggling with Cortana, right? And they recently announced they're no longer accepting third-party skills for Cortana. I believe that was
Yeah.
last year, right?
Yep.
At the same time, you see usage going up, whether it's Alexa or Siri or these other thing,
Oh, Google. Yeah.
Google, excuse me, and it is already coming into the workplace. It's just happening not on a broad basis like one we may have thought, like, oh, everybody's going to be using voice in the enterprise. It's happening in very specific domains, and that's something we've always maintained. Is that look, natural? Like I think one thing I would recommend is we should change the language we use. I think we should stop calling it voice and voice first and just talk about voice. It should be around natural language interfaces. Because at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the day, what we're talking about is a human, whether it is speaking through my voice or me typing a response, I'm still speaking in plain English or Spanish or Japanese. Whatever my natural language is what I'm speaking in. And I'm expecting the computer to understand what the hell I'm talking about. And that is a field that is fundamentally different from the traditional enterprise software industry where you think about databases and forms on top of a database with some workflow in between. I mean, you can reduce pretty much every major SaaS public company into a specific data model and database with a specific set of workflows with some forms on top of it, right? Every single one, Workday, Salesforce, SAP, so on and so forth. But they're all based upon this technology, this metaphor, the user experience metaphor called WIMP, Windows Icons, Menus, Pointers. It was invented at the Xerox Park right down the street from where I live. And that hasn't changed in 40, 50 years. That was invented 40, 50 years ago. And every single part of our computing stack is really built for that. A natural language doesn't fit naturally, no pun intended, into that stack, right? Or has not traditionally. So what you're talking about here is a fundamentally different stack that one has to build to do natural language well, for computers to be able to understand what I just said. They can understand when I point at something and I click on it, they understand it perfectly well. They know what method to trigger in the background. They know what record to write into the right database with transactional integrity. But if I just say, hey, what's the latest on the Cisco deal? How is a computer supposed to understand that? So developing natural language understanding and being able to um, really be able to create an interface that a human finds natural to use, like you would a human EA, human executive assistant, is pretty hard, and it's pretty different from everything else that you find in a typical stack. That kind of explains why some of the vendors in this space have suffered. It's sort of, it was a thing, as you said, right, a couple of years ago, everybody got on the bandwagon talking about voice. You saw the demos at the user conferences, but we've been hunkered down working on some very specific constrained use cases, and that's been working really well. A general purpose voice assistant like Google or Assistant or Siri for the enterprise doesn't make sense. But a very specifically purpose-built assistant that helps a pharmaceutical rep, like we have with Novartis, one of our customers, where this pharma rep, before they go visit a doctor or see them on the Zoom call or Teams call, our assistant comes to them and tells them, here's what you need to know before you go visit this doctor. And then after the call is done, they're able to do a log of that call, of that interaction, document that. There's no better way to do that than just dictating what's fresh in your mind and be able to capture that in your CRM. Charles, the guy I was talking to you earlier about from Honeywell, the VP of Global Sales at Honeywell, he says, you got to capture the essence of a customer conversation in what he calls the golden 5 minutes, right? When you come out of a customer call, that's when everything is fresh in your mind of, okay, what is the customer's decision making process going to be? What do I need to do to win this business? And what did I promise them that I'm going to get back to them with next week? Get it out of your head as quickly as possible, because otherwise there's an exponential decay of that information as you wait for the end of the day or end of the week before your forecast call. Get it out, put it into the CRM system. And oh, by the way, that CRM system then with Tact Assistant comes and tells you and reminds you that, hey, Brent, you talked to so-and-so and you need to follow up on these things. That, if you can focus the use case to be a narrow domain like that, you can build a killer voice assistant. And now we've got our voice assistant deployed at this pharma company I was talking about, in 5 different languages. By the end of the year, it'll be 9 different languages across thousands of pharma reps, across their iPads and iPhones and so on and so forth. So I think that the combination of mobile and voice and our natural language, and the applying that technology to a very specific set of use cases, you can drive. We're seeing a lot of success in that, even though as a whole, the general purpose voice assistant category hasn't taken off.
So it sounds like the bottom line is maybe I was too I don't know, overzealous, thinking that this would happen in a time frame that it hasn't yet. But it's not to say it won't. You've got the general building blocks. You've got Amazon, you got Google, and and Apple, and they kind of are creating like the general purpose layer, and what you're doing and what probably will happen eventually is you are building the more specific, contextual based, industry specific, and in some instances you could actually go down to the corporation, because the industry has jargon, and then on top of that could be the individual companies that
Yep.
have jargons and things that are important to them. So you're seeing like a building block. You have the general layer by the big guys like Amazon and Microsoft and Google and Apple. Then you have the industry contextual pieces that could be built by, the big guys in the industry and folks like you. And then you can actually help individual companies build specific layer for their jargon, for their language on top of all these other pieces.
That's right. And you have to do it in multiple languages too.
Well, so there's a lot of layers of complexity
Yeah,
there.
that's
And
right.
and I and then let me just throw this out before we go to a big question of the day. Where does privacy fit into all this? What is this? Is this another boundary, particularly from the enterprise perspective, about using these kind of tools and technologies?
It certainly is. I got to say, where I've been disappointed, where I've been wrong, is on Alexa. And Alexa, I love Alexa. My kids love Alexa. We use it a lot. But we can all agree that whether it's deserved or not, Alexa has gotten a really bad rap around privacy, even even in your home. And in the enterprise, it's even more. I expected with the Alexa for Business announcement, Amazon will start making inroads into it, and hasn't. I blame it partly on these privacy concerns, which again you could argue if they're warranted or not, but it certainly exists. So the question of privacy is very important, and it's important even in your personal lives for sure, but even more important in this because the purchasing decision isn't made by the end user; it's being made by the CIO and the line of business owner, who in our case is the VP of sales, like a Charles at Honeywell. And privacy is huge. And I'll give you one other example. Um, you take a pharma company like Novartis and any pharma company, they have regulatory concerns. There are certain things that if a doctor mentions an adverse event, like, hey, one of my patients took this drug and they had this side effect, you've got to report it as an adverse event, right? So there are some specific concerns around using voice for all of this stuff. So we've just been sort of knocking them down one after another. And one of the key things that people worry about is when to do voice right and to do natural language processing right, you have to have a lot of data on how people use this thing. So you have to collect the data on what people are at, what kind of questions they're asking the assistant, and how is the assistant responding, and whether it's getting it right or not. Because part of this is that you're never done with natural language processing, right? Somebody tomorrow, you're going to have a perfect system today. Somebody tomorrow is going to break it by saying one thing, and they're going to make up a word, and it's not going to know what it means. And so it has to be constantly trained. Again, like a good human assistant, you have to constantly train it. And training data means you're collecting data on how people use it, which then goes back to the privacy concern. So one of the things that we do is that when we collect this kind of data around what these users are, we actually isolate the data for per customer. So even though our software runs in a multi-tenant environment, every one of our customers' data is on AWS. Not only is it a single tenant environment on our system, in our account, we can actually host the data on the customer's AWS account. So what some people call cloud premise, sort of the happy mixture of cloud and on-premise. It's essentially your customer has their data center running inside AWS, and Tact can put all of their customer data inside that instance. Secondly, we encrypt all of that data, and that encryption key is managed by the customer. Most vendors will tell you, of course, we encrypt all of customer data. Well, but it's an encryption key that's held by the vendor. Whereas what we do differently is that we let the customer decide and manage the encryption keys. So at any point, they can turn it on and off. So those are some ways I think you can mitigate privacy concerns. But look, the reality is these privacy concerns are not going to go away anytime soon. And they're no different from the privacy concerns that we used to talk about back when I was at Siebel in 2004 about the cloud. Remember?
Yeah.
Everybody had the same concerns. But
Yeah.
but I think if you have the right approach, the right technical approach, you can solve it even today. We've done it, right? So it's a single tenant. We call it BYOK, bring your own key. These kinds of technologies exist. And if you take the time to implement them, then a large enterprise like Cisco or Honeywell or Novartis is going to be okay with it.
All right, this is great. I'm glad we had this conversation. That gives me some hope that it's still possible. It's still out there, and I think it may be even likely because the benefit. I think the potential benefit is really big and important, and these hurdles are kind of big too. But I think there's a big payoff at the end of this. So
Totally agree.
okay, so I want to do something now because there's a big thing going on in the industry right now, and you've been around the industry for a long time. And we're going to talk. We're going to get your take on Oracle and TikTok. But before I do, let me welcome in. This is kind of strange because I'm used to seeing this guy just saying I'm Brent Leary, and then he says
I'm Paul Greenberg,
and then I say we are the CRM players. But this is not technically a CRM players show.
Nope.
This is like a weird mashup of my one-on-ones with my CRM players. But anyway, this is an important mashup because everybody's talking about Oracle and TikTok. So I've got you two guys with me here. I would love to get your take on what do you make of this? What do you make of Oracle getting this partnership? Because it's not like a real acquisition. It's something. But what do you guys make of this? I'm going to ask Chuck to go first, and then I'll ask, Mr. Greenberg, this guy that I barely know.
Paul, I don't know if you missed this part, but I'm excited that I started out on the BBC and now I'm on the PBS. I had to explain, Paul, to Brent what PBS was. It's the Paul and Brent show. So
you're going to turn us into an empire soon enough.
You already are. You already are the media moguls. Maybe you should put in a bid for TikTok. I think that would be fantastic.
We already talked about it. We decided we're just not going to do it because we want the algorithms too.
Right. We put in $35, but that didn't work.
We thought it was TikToks, but yeah.
How about How about $666, Brent?
Oh no! I'm getting off this show right
now. I don't know what to make of it, Brent. To be honest, you could make the argument that there is benefits to Oracle's current products, Marketing Cloud and others, but I just don't see it. I don't see how TikTok makes any sense for Oracle. I don't know what else to say. Paul's going to educate. He's going to school me on why it does.
Look, this one was hard for every one of us, I think. I mean, we all were kind of wondering, where did this even come from?
Yeah.
I think I'm starting to get a working hypothesis, but that's all it is, and I don't have anything definitive, really. But the tip-off for me came when Oracle was announced as a trusted technology partner, meaning they weren't buying TikTok, right? Which also tells you there was some politics involved in this deal too. But there's a few things that happened with that sort of build toward this hypothesis first, which is that one, just prior to the decision and while the bid with Microsoft was still going on, even prior to that, right prior to that bid, TikTok had just committed to buying $800 million worth of Google Cloud services, right? Which, it's a nice chunk of income, one way or the other, for Google. And, Larry Ellison has pretty much made it clear that he wants to be the cloud service boss, and he's running a fairly distant third right now. And then the other thing that I think goes to my hypothesis was when Larry announced their relationship to Zoom, right? So I think it's the combination kind of tells you where this is going, which maybe, and this is a maybe, because ultimately Larry Ellison's not spending, other than the money to, become the infrastructure for TikTok, cloud infrastructure for TikTok, he's not spending anything acquiring TikTok at all. He's basically making money on this deal, right? So by being the trusted technology partner. And consequently, the same thing with Zoom, right? He's basically going to make a lot of money being the cloud infrastructure of Zoom. And ultimately, if you start looking at what he's doing there, which is still an odd move for Oracle anyway, he's looking at, okay, what, and kind of smartly in his own way, looking at what is post-COVID communications going to look like and interactions going to look like. And TikTok's part of it. It's already, TikTok TikTok was always huge, but it's even skyrocketed more thanks to everyone being home all the time. And two, of course, Zoom became Zoom, the verb, because of what's going on now. And Larry Ellison's basically saying, well, if I become the infrastructure for this, cloud infrastructure for this, that's a dent that he's making into AWS. He's certainly making into Google Cloud Services, because I have to presume, even though I don't know, that 800 million is going to him now. And third, into, even though I think this is less of his his idea, but I know Brent has a good point on this, and I'll let him make it. On third, of course, up ahead, kind of not exactly head to head because they're partnered now, but basically, let's say in some collision with Azure. So I think ultimately, it's part of this is a way to. I don't think it's all about just all. A lot of people are saying it's all about the consumer data. I don't know that I buy into that much, because Larry Ellison doesn't. That's not his thing. He's not looking at consumer data. He doesn't care about it. I mean, he cares about it, but I think this is his way of becoming a backbone infrastructure in a consumer world, right? In part where he can get billions of interactions and actions being taken every day on his infrastructure, to show that he can compete and maybe even beat AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, et cetera, to become number one infrastructure cloud provider, because he has the hybrid public-private, hardware, software approach to the cloud. And so I think it's that. Again, I don't know for sure. That's kind of it's a hypothesis I have for now.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that, and I think it also, you got to throw in the losing the Jedi contract, the $10 billion Jedi contract to Microsoft, and then seeing Microsoft bid on TikTok, and if they want to compete with Azure and AWS, that would have been a tough 1-2 punch to take, because that just would have put them further and further behind, I think. Consumer data, and the other thing that kind of gave that away a little bit was the statement about Oracle saying, "Hey, we're not really interested in the the APIs and the intelligence, the algorithms behind how they recommend the videos on TikTok." And then also, if let's say Microsoft did get that, they got that that intelligence, and they have we don't talk a lot about what Bing and search and their advertising platform has. But let's say that Microsoft did get that, then that's a nice little piece of the puzzle, which could be added into the Azure platform, and once again put Oracle further and further behind AWS and Azure, and maybe even Google. So this is a really, I've been thinking about it. I don't know what the money is. I don't know what how that works, but I think given that they want to be seen as a big time player and want to compete with Azure and AWS, this actually does give them a little bit more ammunition for that when you couple it with the Zoom announcement and the partnership around that. And also, that consumer data is good. I mean, they got Blue Kai, they've got a DMP, they've got consumer profiles. Well, they have billions of consumer profiles. So that if they're able to tie that in, they don't have to own it, and it becomes a pretty good win-win for them. And once again, it keeps it away from Microsoft and it keeps it away from Amazon. So I was thinking, I didn't quite understand it. I thought I saw a better alignment with the Microsoft Walmart TikTok, and maybe that would have been a bigger competitor for Amazon, but Oracle wants to be in the game, and they've got the money and they got the assets, and this gives them an opportunity to move up instead of fall behind, I think.
Agree. Totally agree. Listen, guys, I literally have to drop off because I have a call at 1:45, but it was like my guerrilla my gorilla Andy.
Glad you
So,
joined us, though.
so
Oh,
we're gonna
I
go.
see your smiling face, Chuck, man. It's been a long time.
I know. Yeah,
I know it's too long, man.
it's great to see you.
Same.
So this was a
All right.
preview of what you get on the PBS channel.
Yes.
Now we're going back to the BBC. Watch me change the branding.
Watch
too.
this.
Watch-
Donations will be accepted for PBS.
Oh.
All right, guys. It's a
We'll see you
pleasure.
later.
See you later.
Bye, Paul.
I want to pop up this one comment too. This is a buddy on Doctor he has been deemed. What is that label he has? The master of Martech. Anyway, he's a big Martech influencer. He has a cool title. Put that title in there if you get a chance. But yeah, Google Cloud, Twitter, YouTube, Microsoft Cloud, LinkedIn, Amazon Cloud, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Snapchat. So yeah, this gives Oracle a big a partnership with a big, what I forget how many, was it 800 million monthly active users for TikTok or something like that. I don't know if there were any of those big major social platforms that had that Oracle was a part of, like the other ones. So this is beyond CRM, I think, this move right here.
Way beyond. I don't even know what they would do with all of that data, even if they got it. Right. I don't think they'll touch it, but even if they got it, they wouldn't. Oracle wouldn't know what to do with it. So I think this idea that you need to have a social platform to prove that your cloud is worth it is it's probably what's driving that deal. I think Paul could be right that it might be revenue accretive, this deal for Oracle, and make the cloud look bigger. I just don't think that's that's the way to win in the cloud market, but that's me.
It'll be interesting to see. I think I'm not going to say this is akin to a Hail Mary, but I think they were looking for a game changer because of, I mean, when you think of the cloud, you think of AWS and Azure right now. Now, when you're in the enterprise, of course, you think of Oracle, but it just feels like this is an opportunity that they are looking at that could potentially, move them closer to the top. Could be. Right. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right.
That's the working theory.
I can tell you're not quite buying that working theory.
Well, no. I am buying. Here's what I'm buying. I'm buying that's probably, Paul and you are right, that's probably what's driving this deal. I'm just not sure that'll help them win.
Yeah, winning is a different thing. Maybe just, I don't know what it's going to take for them to leapfrog. I mean, AWS has a huge lead. Azure is really coming up very close to AWS. But there's a big distance between those two and like Google Cloud and Oracle and everybody else. Maybe they're just, I mean, they've got the resources, they've got they got the things that to throw out there and try that could create a scale that moves them closer. This alone, probably not, but they're doing some, if they could get more of those Zoom kind of deals. And I don't know how many Zoom kind of partnerships there are out there, because Zoom is, everybody was, click to switch as soon as the pandemic shut everything down and we were all Zooming. Yeah. And that partnership, I mean, that was the great timing for that partnership.
That was a great deal. That was a fantastic deal.
Yeah. This, I don't think it was the same.
No, I was wondering why, Larry had this Zoom interview that he posted on LinkedIn talking about how great the company is and how the whole company, Oracle, is all running on Zoom now. And then it made sense. A couple of weeks later, they announced the Zoom deal, right? It made a lot of sense back then. Look, I think, if you think about retailers, they don't want to touch AWS with a pole, right? Like
they don't want their data anywhere near
AWS. So if you look at all of the segments of companies that, and Amazon is just going into more and more industries, right? Amazon is an apparel company, it's a furniture company, it's a retailer, it's everything now. So I think there will be pockets of these large markets that will eventually become will want to get off of AWS at some point, right?
Right.
And that's a great market to go after. And if you think about Oracle's strengths is in the enterprise, they're a trusted provider to enterprises, right? To CIOs. And I don't know if many CIOs, I know a few, I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking, will one of those CIOs choose Oracle because TikTok runs on that platform? I don't think so. It's just me, but I'm not sure
Not for that
that
reason.
logic makes sense to me. And
Not
yeah,
for
does it suddenly get you to post up a $800 million deal and make your cloud look big? That's that's just appearances, right? But the real long-term value, in my mind, is questionable for that reason.
But when you're Oracle and you got a lot of money, money is like not the biggest restraint for these guys. I think
Yep.
getting to that top echelon by, even if it's initially, if a deal that brings a lot of attention helps, it might be worth it to a company like Oracle, because they got so many resources and so much to throw at things. And I think they're in it for the long term. I don't think this is like, oh, this is, I should say, yeah, I don't think it's a Hail Mary now that I think about it, because knowing Oracle, they do things, they take the long, the vision. And I mean, sometimes things take a long time for it to be unfurled, and they stick to it until it does. And so
Yep.
I have no reason to think that they're not looking at the long view, and maybe this is just an opportunity, a part of one of many moves ahead. But we'll see. It'll be
Right.
interesting to see how that all plays out. But in the meantime,
Yeah.
tell us where we're going to be with what our early conversation. I see employee experience being a great opportunity for these voice, or as you say, natural language interfaces to truly go beyond like the consumer side or the call center, but really the helping the day-to-day interactions of advanced applications, using natural language to really affect user adoption for those kind of systems. I think there's an opportunity there. Maybe it's further out than I thought, but do you see it as fertile ground for those kind of you know critical applications that, like a CRM user, like a Salesforce automation user, eventually will have natural language to leverage, to be able to interact with these systems and make it easier for them to get the data in and the data out and actually get the value that they really wanted all along? Do you think we'll get there 2, 3, 4, 5 years out?
Well, I think it's a long game, like you said, and like Oracle, you have to play the long game here. And it's not a quick fix to anything. You can't. Some people think of voice as a lipstick on a pig, like my underlying system is horrible, so I'm just going to put a voice interface
Oh,
and suddenly it'll be magical. And it's not. You have to fundamentally rethink it, and that, as you know, takes time. I I believe that it is critical, and every application will have to be rethought, to suit this, for the simple reason. I think it will become a customer expectation, a user expectation, as we have the workforce changing. Generational change in workforce is going to force that. Just think about that, right? My kids, your kids, when they come into the workforce, they're going to expect this. And you know, we for mobile, it took a while, right? Like, you remember 7 years ago, everybody talked about mobile, and it took a while after that initial hype cycle to die down. That now people expect that. People expect to be able to work on their iPads and their iPhones and so on. And I think voice will take a similar path. So I guess my summary to you would be: don't be disappointed with yourself that hype and the forecast that you had for voice is not coming through. I just think it's following the typical hype cycle of extreme hype and extreme disappointment. And the recovery will also be longer. And the reason it'll be longer is that this technology is fundamentally hard. It's not just hard for startups. It's not just hard for enterprise software vendors. It's hard for Google. It's hard for Apple, right? Like, think about how long it took Apple to figure out Siri. Think about how long it took Google to figure out Google Assistant and Google Voice. This is not easy. If it's not easy for those guys, just imagine a company like ours, right? This is but you got to stick with it. If you do, then you have really big opportunities. And all I can tell you is we have found really massive opportunities in specific use cases. And I think we'll just have more and more of those specific use cases become prevalent. And then it becomes something that everybody expects and everybody has in their workplace.
Yeah, I'm so glad you put it in that perspective, because next year will be the 10-year anniversary of Siri, I believe, 2021, because I think it came out in 2011.
I think you're right.
When you think about it, has it come as far as it could have, or that we expected? Probably not. But you have seen progress, and maybe progress will accelerate after there's a little bit more of a understanding of just exactly what it's going to take. Because I do think it's going to be a little, I have pared back my expectations, but I do still think there's an opportunity here, and I'm glad that you guys are leading the charge, man, and getting it out there, because it sometimes feels like the interest from a vendor perspective ebbs and flows, but you seem always, you're there. You're running the marathon. You're not running the sprint.
That's exactly right.
Cool, man. This has been great. I just love talking to you, because I am so interested in this, and I love to see how you guys keep progressing and moving this forward, because eventually we're going to have a conversation. We're going to be like, hey, do you remember the time where people like you got disgusted and said it's not going to happen? Oh, it was on that PBS show, or was it on the BBC? I can't remember. Oh, let me just end this with Anand loves your analysis here. Yes, you're right. Yeah, he's right, and you're right, and I am looking forward to a time where we actually we start really feeling like this is making a serious impression, because I think this has a great opportunity to change. We're talking about how working from home is changing the work life. I think this kind of stuff will also have a big impact on how people work, and a positive impact on how people work, if we're able to stay the course like you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Always great talking to you, Brent.
Absolutely. This has been great. And just so people do know, where can people find out what you guys are up to and what you're doing?
Just go to Tact.ai.
And that's TACT.ai. Cool. Well, I will let you get back to it. Thanks for the time. I kept you from the big Apple reveal, so maybe you could catch the get an inside scoop on when the iPhone 12 with the 5G is coming out, because I'm looking for that one myself.
I'm looking for the new Apple Watch.
Yeah, all the health things on that one is really exciting. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, Chuck. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Brent. Cheers.